So I want to dig into how you can make content from things that you have really easy access to, but you might have even passed over it because it feels a bit boring, or even a lot boring, to be fair. And I've got a whole bunch of examples as well of people doing this that you can borrow from. So I think the way I term this is something around real life content. So what does that strike in you when I say that? What's real life content? You think of any examples?
Day-to-day vlogging, like the early 2000s or 2010s, like Casey Neistat and all that kind of stuff. That's what comes to mind.
Yeah. So that's kind of that's a start for it. So yeah, absolutely. Those early days where it's just people broadcasting their real life. I find though that's the thing that puts people off trying to think about this kind of thing, because like Casey just seemed to have such an interesting life in New York. Although I agree, he was a great example of making banal stuff quite interesting. There's even like the kind of rise of I've totally forgotten his name. The bodybuilder guy that always wears his cap, always films in the car. Do you remember his name at all? I'll stick it in the description if you don't know it. But it's this guy who's grown a huge following. He's just a bodybuilder. He just like films himself in the gym, going in the car, talking about random stuff. So just filming really lo-fi. But really, the niche that I think is really worth digging into actually is around work. It's around people who have potentially like perceivably boring jobs, but actually you can create great content out of it. Mm-hmm. So I think like people have been doing this for decades with both YouTube and a decade at least, with both YouTube and podcasting around if you sell a service, if you sell a product, like, you know, how many podcasts can you name that's an agency, like either a marketing agency or a growth agency or something like that, that does podcast teaching their topic?
Yeah.
Like millions of them around, isn't there? So they're a really good example to start with. But then you've got other ones, like there's a channel I came across recently called the Aquarium Co-op. So you have a shop, you sell like fish equipment, you sell the aquariums, but you also sell the fish. And this channel called the Aquarium Co-op, look it up on YouTube. And it's just this really interesting channel where he just talks about that kind of topic. So how's this for an example? We've got videos on really obvious ones like, where do I buy my aquarium fish? So like, you know, questions that people are searching online. It's like classic SEO. What are your customers searching for online? But then also some entertainment stuff as well. What type of fish would you never touch again? So there's a kind of intriguing one, like what you're not going to get into, that kind of stuff. I like to look at the oldest ones sometimes, like go into videos and go to oldest and then see like, where are some ones, like what did he actually start out with?
Yeah.
Can you breed fish in a bucket? Beginner's Guide to Mini Fish Ponds. So, and you look at that, you look at the thumbnail of that, and what we're seeing here is just somebody like filming on their phone, essentially, looking at like just filming something that's just quite interesting to people that are really into fish. So it's a kind of boring subject to some people, but actually some people are really into their fish, they're into their aquariums. So you create content around that, and suddenly it's just like really exciting. So go on.
Listen, like this guy started 11 years ago, and you would think I wouldn't think there's that much to say about aquariums and tropical fish now. I will probably get shot down by enthusiasts, but the guy's been going for 11 years.
Yeah.
He's made over 1,000 videos, 1,100 videos, and he's got, that's a really pleasing number, 11 years, 1.1 thousand videos, and 1.1 million subscribers. That is insane.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
There's literally anything can be extracted for the long term.
Yeah. So I mean, I think if you're in a position where you're selling products to people, there's obvious demand because somebody's buying those products, and therefore there are people that are interested in those products. So I find so many people that deny that they could make a podcast about nuts and bolts. Like, I sell nuts and bolts to companies, but that's nonsense because there's people buying those things, and therefore you can find an angle on it to create that content, whether it's YouTube, whether it's social media, whether it's a podcast or anything. But actually looking a bit deeper into this, I found the less obvious ones that give really good examples there's some really interesting ones too. Like, for example, so there's a channel called Post 10. And what this guy does is he runs basically a construction company He does like all sorts of stuff, like home demos, like residential, electrical, lawn care, that kind of thing. And he just
Right.
takes his phone or a camera with him on jobs. And the most popular stuff on his channel is generally stuff like unclogging drains.
Right.
So complete draining flooded by pond. So he's got a video here completely draining a flooded pond by unclogging a bridge.
Yeah.
So he's gone out on the job and he's doing something that is like, I mean, seeming it's quite kind of work a day almost. You're just unclogging a drain, but this stuff's actually fascinating. Like you
It
watch
is.
him
Yeah, it's
doing
so
these
like it's
things.
that day in the life like kind of
Yeah.
vlog style thing, and it's happening for so many different types of like businesses that I've noticed. Like ones that I always get seem to be like lawn care companies, and their shtick is that they're a service provider in a local area. They will just go over to a home that has overgrown grass, either because
Yep.
like they're disabled or don't have the money or just haven't bothered to do it, and they'll just knock on the
Mhm.
door and say, "Can I do this for free?" And all I want to do is film it. You don't have
Yeah.
to pay me anything. He'll go and
Oh,
do it. He'll make
really?
some great content out of it. Yeah. And it's kind of fascinating to see like someone, to see anyone who's an expert at
Yeah.
something do their thing. It's
Yeah.
fascinating.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
also there's some things that are actually just quite satisfying to watch, like pool cleaning or
Mm.
like the before and after of like a really overgrown lawn. Like there's so many of these small businesses that are managing to reach way beyond their kind of local area
Yeah.
by
Yeah.
creating interesting content about the
Absolutely.
day to day stuff.
Yeah, 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 and you can monetize that through your services. So maybe this guy doesn't sell his services to individuals, but it's to companies, and
Yeah.
it just people come across it. And if it's a high ticket item, you only have to have a few followers to actually make a decent living out of it. There was another one, this one called Matt's Off Road Recovery. I love this one because this is a guy with technically maybe a boring job, as in he just recovers vehicles. He's just a tow truck guy. But I mean, you do that kind of job and you're going to get some pretty interesting situations, aren't you?
Yeah, yeah. There's gonna be all sorts of
I mean, this guy's,
shenanigans that are just fun
yeah,
to watch.
totally. And this guy's
Yeah,
done quite well because he's based in a really interesting area where loads of people go out in their jeeps and they try and do off roading and they crash their jeeps in really crazy places. So he's got some
yeah,
videos of recovering jeeps from rivers, from like up cliffs, all this kind of stuff. So, I mean, some people have a slight advantage in that they're in a scenic place, but I'd argue that most people can find a way to make even quite seemingly banal work really well.
yeah. I
And yep.
sorry, I was just going to say there's a channel that I watch quite religiously. There's exactly this. I've just realised. It's
Yep.
called Asheville, and it's a guy down in England, and he
Hmm.
basically I think he tried to start this construction company out of just kind of nothing, and it's just showing like it almost got back to go into administration several times. Like it's been a
Hmm.
really really rocky journey, and it's honestly it's kind of like watching a high budget drama sometimes. It's kind of what it
Okay.
feels like.
Yeah.
But it's just them like trying to find like a yard because they're getting kicked out of their old yard. They've lost the lease, and like that first if you open it there, the first video. Oh, that's interesting. I've got a different one, but it's that one. Is this the end of Asheville? That's the one that caught me like 5 months ago, and they were in a really really horrible position. They might have had to close the company. They had dozens of people working for them. They had
Really?
all this
Yeah.
plant equipment. They had nowhere to put it, and like the lease situation in London is just not good. But yeah, he's just managed to turn. I wonder how much this content actually supports his overall bottom line,
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
think it's probably quite high because the amount of effort that goes into it, and on top of the job that is obviously super demanding, it must be
Yeah.
worth it. I'd love to chat to him about it.
It has to be. Yeah. There's. I mean, yeah, absolutely. This is a B2B business, isn't it? So
Yeah,
it's hiring out trucks, it's doing waste management services to the construction industry. But all of that, I mean, any content like this raises your profile, doesn't it? It gets
yeah,
yourself out there more. And if you're in the industry, you're probably even more likely to come across this word of
yeah.
mouth and everything.
I
So,
actually I don't even for that company like that, and it's interesting. I don't think it's necessarily getting clients who are
mhm.
finding the videos, but I think being so public with yourself, being so public with your business and how you work and your values and how
Yeah,
you
yeah.
think, all of that stuff, that is like if he went to tender, Asheville
Hmm.
went to tender
Hmm.
versus another company that was your standard blue logo. We've got
Yeah.
loads of trucks and we're really good at what we do. Like, who would you pick? Would you pick the guy that shows you how the sausage is made and shows like how much he cares about the service that he's delivering extensively,
Yeah.
documents it? Or would you go with the guy that has lots of trucks and promises they're really good?
Yeah.
I would
Absolutely
probably go
agreed.
with the
Yeah.
the farmer.
Yeah, yeah. And even the ancillary stuff to that, if you share, the people behind the company, the values, the personality,
Exactly.
recruitment, like finding people to work for you. You
Oh
have
yeah.
people that are probably applying. I bet you people are applying to that company way more than any other in that area.
Yeah.
People shifting like waste management companies to go work for him. Even internally, like the team that works for him, they'll see all of this, and that'll be such a team motivator having this content go out. I'm sure.
Yeah.
I mean, it might be kind of self-selecting. Like some people might go out of the business because of it. They don't want to be involved in things like
Possibly.
that being quite public, but it'll
Yeah.
attract people that match like the values, the ethos, the enthusiasm of the guy that's running this. So
Exactly.
yeah, all these extra things too.
Yeah.
I'll show one final one. Let's just so this one here is called the Hoof GP. And if you're not watching the video on this, I'll still describe it through to you, but it's worth going and having a look at this for the simple fact that there's a whole YouTube channel dedicated to a vet going out and fixing cows' hoofs. So the thumbnails on this channel are just full of pictures of hooves, and it's just actually a bit minging in some cases.
The lovely
As
pussy
in,
ones where they've got
there's
to
a
get the abscesses out and
there's a fountain of pus from this cow's hoof. Wonderful, lovely. Who would
yeah.
have like that is, I mean, if you're going to pitch an idea that is most likely to be shot down in flames, it's this. I'm going to create a channel just looking at cows' hoofs and like chopping bits off them and looking a bit minging. But no, it's got 2.3 million subscribers somehow.
People like
So
all sorts of things though. Like
yeah,
I think this actually is similar to the lawn care kind of one where it's an element of satisfaction. You know, there's this
yeah.
whole strange, I don't quite get it, subculture on the internet around watching, or I don't, maybe it's not so much a big thing anymore, but it was for a while, like popping videos. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Popping?
I
No,
don't
no,
even want
not at
to
all.
describe it. Nah, it's pimple
Oh,
popping on
like
video and like
popping.
whiteheads and
Yeah.
yeah. And I think it's the same kind of. I think people just get some sort of satisfaction from it, but
Ooh,
it's the yeah. But I think it's the same kind of thing with this.
yeah. Lovely. All right. Well, a final one as well. It's a wee bit of a wee bit of a different angle on it. Like if your job is not necessarily if it doesn't necessarily lend itself to good videos, then sometimes it's actually just using those skills to teach other people. So we talked earlier on about the marketing company, all that kind of stuff. So they're kind of more obvious. They're selling their services. But this one here that I'm showing now is called Chris Fix. So Chris Fix is actually just a mechanic by trade, but he just shows people how to fix their own cars. So it's taking the skill that he has in his work. He doesn't necessarily film his day-to-day work, but he films videos about how to fix certain things about cars, how to choose a good car, how to keep your car maintained, all that kind of stuff. So it's more like, the plumber that shows you how to do a DIY job, or, the electrician. No, actually, don't do DIY electrics. But yeah, so it's a slightly different angle on it, but still can work really nicely. So yeah, that's another example as well.
So, is there anything in like your life in the past or any point now? Is like, can you think of anything that you would want to do that you could apply this to for you?
Yeah, I wonder. I mean, yeah, I think you could. I think you genuinely can do it with any job, really. Like when I was a kid, my parents ran their own business running a golf driving range.
Oh, cool.
So that's a kind of boring environment, but I got to see some really weird and wonderful things behind the scenes, like going in the back room and seeing how the ball dispenser worked, like filling that up, unblocking it when it got blocked, going out in the ball collector machine, stuff like that. Like it's all
Yeah,
stuff that people
yeah,
haven't done. Like I can imagine going out there with my phone and filming myself driving around, picking up balls, how that thing works. That's one of those satisfying videos, like watching a ball collector
exactly.
picking balls up off the ground, popping them into the buckets,
Yeah,
and watching, being able to show how anytime I went out in that vehicle, you become the target. Like you
Yeah,
get people are aiming at you, like they're turning as they're golfing, like aiming at you, and you get smacked a whole bunch of times, and it scares the absolute shit out of you when you get
make
hit by
great
that.
content though.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And then the time where it gets blocked and stuck, and you have to actually get out of the thing and try not to get hit by the actual balls. So stuff like that, I think. I don't know, just about any kind of boring job. What about you? Can you think of any that would be something that could have been interesting content in the past?
Definitely working in a kitchen.
Oh yeah.
Working in a kitchen. See if you could set up just like a GoPro or a few GoPros in a
Hmm.
kitchen on an average like Friday night service.
Yep.
The drama, the drama, the tension, the back chat, but also like the camaraderie and the support, and like
Yeah.
it's got everything that you would expect to see in in like a proper drama. So
Yeah.
yeah, something like that. And you know what?
Yeah.
It would make people want to come to that restaurant because they would
It
get
would.
to know the actual
Yeah.
people that are doing the work.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
the Bear's basically the dramatized version of that, isn't it? Have
totally,
you seen the
totally.
Bear at all? Yeah.
Yeah,
Such a good
yeah,
program. Yeah. Cool. Okay.
yeah. Just
I.
final thing on that.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Yeah.
before we
Go for
move
it.
on, it's just
Yeah.
like while we've been talking through this, it's just we take for granted the things that we do every day,
Hmm.
and it's hard to imagine that things that we do every day that are really regular to us, that are really just routine, would be interesting to other people. But I think all of these examples kind of show that almost everyone watching, whether if you're making content or you're not, or if you know someone that isn't, but you just you've got that feeling that maybe they should. Um, People really are interested in the craziest things. You can
Yeah.
find anything on YouTube, and you'll find a channel for it that's got a few 100,000 subscribers for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
So, like,
Definitely.
I don't know, it's an interesting exercise
Yeah.
for you, the listener. Just have a look at your life, or even in the
Yeah.
past as an exercise, But like day to day things that you do, like wherever it is that you work, whatever it is that you do, just the mundane stuff that people don't get to see every day. We all get so stuck in our own heads, our own routines, our own careers, and we forget that people outside of ourselves have whole interests and whole it's cool. It's worth
Yeah.
thinking about.
Definitely. Yeah. 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 A final comment around a slight pivot to that is even if you decide, you take that look at your life and you decide, really, there's nothing I want to film in my entire life, which I find really unlikely. But even if you end up feeling that way, there's an example in the form of a channel called Soft White Underbelly. And I haven't looked in detail at the videos here, but I just came across it in the research that I was doing for this.
Mhm.
And it's about it's a photographer, a guy called Mark Leta. Again, I don't know much about him. I haven't. There's the reason I'm qualifying here is because I'm not. There's some of the content looks like it could almost be potentially a bit controversial, but I'm going to say it anyway because it looks like on the surface is a good example of someone who has taken his job, the fact that he just meets a lot of people through his photography, and just start telling other people's stories. So he just interviews the most random people. He has some stuff on here who are quite kind of obviously going to catch interest, like mob bosses, FBI agents, things like that. But then he's got other people like he's interviewed a meth addict and just found out
Yeah,
what their life is like.
yeah,
And it's just a normal interview, and he has the advantage that he's great with photography, lighting, things like that. So he can create a really nice looking interview. But ostensibly, a lot of it is literally just people sitting in a room talking to a camera. It's like that kind of talking head approach.
yeah,
So even if you decide, yeah, your own life is not interesting enough, I'm sure there's people around you that you could talk to and have conversations with. And again, people are just really interested in normal people that have maybe some slightly unusual things about their life or something like that. I think that can work nicely.
yeah. Definitely. It's I've just had a quick look, and it's just curiosity. I think that's what it
Yeah.
is. Even if there's not something in your life right now that is like you think is prime for filming, or you're not comfortable with it, or whatever. I think
Yeah.
like as long as you have enough curiosity and drive, that's really all. That's what this is in a really kind of artful way.
Yeah.
Curiosity about people and
Yeah.
being able to ask a question, and like
Yeah.
yeah, great point.
Absolutely. The last two that I'll mention very briefly, I found in my research. One was called Legal Eagle. It's a lawyer who talks about. well, he tries to make the law more common, essentially. So law, a pretty boring subject, ostensibly. But he basically tries to explain the law, helps people understand the law, just find interesting things about the law through really interesting lenses. So one of his formats is, the tried and tested real X reacts to. So his is obviously real lawyer reacts to Suits. So he watches an episode of Suits and tells you how absolute nonsense half of the stuff they do in Suits is, or Better Call Saul, or My Cousin Vinny. And another one of his formats is Laws Broken, which I found really fun, actually. He does an episode on Jurassic Park and just talks through every part of Jurassic Park where they're just completely and utterly flouting the law. Going into the intro part in Jurassic Park where they're bringing in a velociraptor, and you've got the boss guy holding a shotgun in front of all his team, and all the team holding these electric prods and stuff like that, and the rest of his team all standing up on the top of the cage, like with no barriers, all this kind of stuff. He's like, but right, okay, so exposed firearm, the cattle prods like waving around in people's faces. That staircase is not up to code. And again, that sounds kind of dull, but actually it's not. It's really fun, entertaining. It's just a good watch, and it teaches you a bit at the same time. And a team that we worked with did something similar. So we worked with a team called Blackadders on a podcast, just an audio podcast, where they were an employment law team who explained employment law topics, but they always found a really cool lens to go through. One example being, they did a whole episode about dismissal. So how to fire somebody. If you're in the US, you probably don't quite get this, but in the UK, it's actually very difficult to fire people for rightly. Like, it's to look after the employees. So you have to be really careful about how you do it and how you justify it. And if you want to get rid of somebody, there has to be all this sort of paperwork and red tape around it, which again is good. It covers people, it helps protect people. But they did it in the form of the Seven Dwarfs. So Sleepy. So how you can fire people for being a bit sleepy and lazy. They had Grumpy. How you can fire people for being rude to your boss, for being rude to employees, all that kind of stuff. So they put them in the form. Each episode was a different dwarf from the Seven Dwarfs, and like framed it in that sense. And it was really fun. It was really entertaining how they put it together. And it just made a lot of sense because they put it in that context. So
that's probably the best example out of all of them, because I honestly cannot think of anything more dull in this world than employment law.
Employment law, yep.
And I kind of want to listen.
But that show actually does really well. They've got a great listenership on it. They've done something like 7 or 8 seasons now, if not more. And it's gotten clients. Like, they've talked to me about it. They've said this brings in clients for us, like day in, day out, because people listen to it. They search employment law on the web. They find the content. They're trying to understand it. They're trying to learn it. They come across our podcast, whether it's through search or they've been told by other companies. People who run businesses talk to other people who run businesses. Mm-hmm. So they find this content. It's out there. So it's excellent.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I hope that gave a decent wee grounding in how to use real life content, how you might find things from your own life to create really interesting content, and how not to overlook and take for granted, like you said, Jacob, how not to take for granted the things that you have access to that other people might be fascinated by, how that could work as content, how it could help to grow your own audience, how it could help to grow a business, all of those things. So I hope that was useful.